Hi everyone, I hope you are enjoying your day. My last video was about the Toronto International Festival of Authors, and I shared the first 10 events that I participated in. So today I'm going to talk about the next 10 events that I participated in during the festival. And this means that there will be a part 3. As I said before in the other video, I went to several events. For those who have watched my videos before, welcome back. For those watching for the first time, I'm so glad that you've been able to join us. My name is Jocelyn from Bookworm Adventure Girl, and I love to read diverse books, diverse authors, and diverse genres. And I really love Canadian literature. If this is something that interests you, then please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I'm going to continue talking about the Toronto International Festival of Authors, or as we affectionately call it, TIFA. It was the 41st edition of the festival, and it was held from October 22nd to November 1st. This year it was all virtual due to COVID, and I had the opportunity to see many authors and learn more about them and their books. So I'm really excited to be able to share even more of that with you today. If you stick around to the end, I am going to share about 2 things that I am really looking forward to that will be happening on Monday, and I'm really excited about it. So I'm going to begin where I left off and start with event number 11 for me, which was Overcoming Expectations with Mieko Kawakami and her translator Jocelyn. Mieko was interviewed by Madeline Tian, who is also an author, and I have a couple of her books on my shelf waiting for me to read them. Mieko's book, which is called Breasts and Eggs, in that book the main character is living in Tokyo. She's basically living on a shoestring from writing and blogging, and her sister comes to have breast implant surgery. The book deals with themes such as beauty, women's bodies, and the pressure of women in Japan. Mieko talked about how many things about women's lives are decided by men, and that even from girlhood, you're taught how to treat boys, what to do and not do so they will like you. There's the idea that beauty means you are good, and therefore if you're good, it means that you are happy. So in the book, the main character explores her feelings of estrangement of her body and her role as a woman. Breasts and Eggs is divided into book 1 and book 2, and the mood is different between the 2 books. Book 1 focuses on the culture and lifestyle in Osaka. So in this part we learn about where the main character comes from, we learn about her values and her life choices. And in book 2 it takes place 8 years later when the main character is dealing with all of the issues of life and asking questions like, why are we born? And why do we give birth at all, knowing that people will suffer? And in the final choice that the main character makes, she comes up against the limits of her own body. In the interview, there was also a discussion I thought was quite interesting, and it was about translation and how translating is unique because it's not creating something new. Mieko is already a celebrated author in Japan, and more of her work will be translated into English, including a translation of her novel called Heaven, which should be out in 2021, so that's one that I'm going to keep an eye out for. The next event was Creating Fiction from Places We Know, with Craig Davidson and David Bergen. Now, Craig Davidson I know as the author of Precious Cargo, which I still need to read, but for this talk he was talking about his short story collection, which is called Cascade. And David Bergen was talking about his short story and novella collection, which is called Hear the Dark, which I have talked about before as part of the shortlist for the Scotiabank Giller Prize. They had a conversation about the structure of their stories and how they order the stories in the collections. And I believe it was Craig who said he is not part of the ordering process, and David who said that he was. David's stories take place in Canada, Vietnam, and Honduras. And part of the discussion was about how you decide what you write about when it isn't your experience. So David talked about fiction writers needing to really write as honestly as possible and to really examine what they are doing and the importance of having readers who are checking them out, because you can't always write about yourself. He did talk about there being a fine balance, and he said that he is much more aware of what he's trying to do now. And Craig Davidson talked about how writing and writers are evolving. He said that there is a different level of necessary scrutiny, and he talked about some of his previous stories and gave examples of a previous story with Indigenous characters, and he kind of asked, like, would he write those stories now? Would he write those characters in the same way? When they were asked who inspires them, David said that he loves Flannery O'Connor and Jamaica Kincaid. I wasn't surprised by O'Connor, and I can see that a bit in his writing, and I've only read one book by Jamaica Kincaid, and I think I need to give her work another try, because the book I did read by her, I really didn't enjoy. So maybe that's something for me to think about for next year. Maybe I'll read a couple of Flannery O'Connor and Jamaica Kincaid books. Up next was Females on the Front Line with Emma Donoghue and Maaza Mengiste. They were interviewed by Marcia Lederman, and Emma Donoghue is the author of The Pull of the Stars, which I have talked about in previous videos about the Giller Prize. Donoghue's book takes place in Ireland with women as main and supporting characters. She has one character, Kathleen Lynn, who is based on a real person. And I always love learning what authors are reading, and when she was asked, Emma said that she's reading Luster by Raven Leliani, I think is how you say her name. Maaza is the author of The Shadow King, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. It is set in Ethiopia, and the women that are front and center in this book are the women who enlisted in the army when Mussolini invaded Ethiopia, and they were left out of historical record, so Maaza is trying to give them voice. When she was asked who she was reading, she actually brought up a name called Scholastique Mukasanga, and she is a Rwandan writer, so I'm very interested in reading some of her books. Event number 14 was Sunday poetry readings, and it included 3 poets reading from their works. First was A.F. Moritz. He read 4 poems from his 20th collection of poetry called As Far As You Know. Canisia Lubrin read from the Dyzgraphxst, which investigates the nature of selfhood and kinship in this world. And third was Ian Williams, who read 3 poems from his newest poetry collection called Word Problems, which I loved. And I'll be talking probably more about him in another video. The next event was Finding Our Ways with Eva Crocker and Marlow Granados. They were interviewed by Stacey May Fowles, who described their novels as 2 coming-of-age stories, and then both of the authors were like, we wouldn't characterize our books in this way. So both books do feature female friendships, and Eva Crocker, who is the author of All I Ask and is the daughter of Lisa Moore, in her book she explores how much of ourselves is in our digital image, and the main characters are in their mid-20s, and there is a queer love story. Eva Crocker mentioned reading Luster as well, and also How to Pronounce Knife, which is on the short list for the Giller Prize and the one I predicted to win this year. Marlow Granados is the author of Happy Hour, and in this book she explores the importance of how we live rather than identifying with what we do. And her main character is also young at the age of 21, and the story takes place in New York, which, if you know me, you know that I love New York. Event number 16 was Memoirs for a Generation with Madhur Anand and Maria Tumararkan. They were interviewed by Heidi Reitmeyer, and Madhur Anand is the author of This Red Line Goes Straight to Your Heart, a memoir in halves. It mixes her family's history, her mother and father's biographies, global historic events such as the partition and the foundations of physics, biology, and poetry. And part 1 is written in her parents' voice, and part 2, you have to flip the book and start again, and then this half is told in Madhur's voice. It's a very unique memoir. Maria Tumakin is the author of Axiomatic, which is written in 5 sections. Each section is different, yet they fit together. They tell true and intimate stories of a community dealing with the extended aftermath of suicide, kidnapping, the justice system, and multi-generational trauma and friendship. This isn't a memoir, it's a book about other people, and in writing this, Maria wanted to be satisfied that she had captured a cultural moment, that she represented the people honestly. It took almost 9 years for her to write this book. Next up was Far From Home with Kai Kello and Suvankam Thamavongsa. They were interviewed by Fiona Ray Clark, and they talked about their short story collections. Kai Kello, author of Dominoes at the Crossroads, which was longlisted for the Scotiabank Giller Prize. The stories are connected in that they all take place in different Canadian cities with characters from different backgrounds within the Caribbean. They all travel across the country, and his aim was to see these characters in Canadian history. So as mentioned in part 1, the theme of home came up often in the events, which is true for this collection of short stories. Home within the characters are multiplied, and there is more to just being from one place. He talked about the characters being enriched by the different places and how they shared that. And he said instead of using the word displacement, he'd rather use the word elsewhere. Suvankam Thamavongsa's the author of How to Pronounce Knife, and it is shortlisted for the Scotiabank Giller Prize, and it's the one I'm hoping will win. In these short stories, all the characters are immigrants or refugees from Laos. And none of them think about home so much, all of them refer to home as here. So the location of the story is not the point, and the location is within the story itself. It helps displace the reader like the characters have been displaced. Suvankam herself was born in a refugee camp. Her parents built a bamboo raft to get to Thailand, and then they were sponsored in Canada. And she talked about being one of 3 million people that nobody wanted in the world at the time. She's often thought of as being far from home, when really she said she thinks she is at home. A book that Suvankam recommended was Philippe Petit's To Reach the Clouds. He's a high wire walker, and he talks about how to handle fear, and he talks about the materials he uses. It sounded very interesting. Number 18 was Reclamation with Leanne Simpson. Leanne is the author of Nupaming. She was interviewed by Devyani Saltzman. And Nupaming means in the bush, and this book is about the importance of relationship and the Anishinaabe view of the world. It focuses on relationships with humans, animals, plants, water, and the interconnectedness of the world. There is lots of fluidity and dynamics between these relationships. The characters in the book are non-gendered, and the book is written like a choral piece, narrating the world between the city and the bush. Simpson says she finds hope in the land and in the ancestors and how they survived and how they embodied their values and built their world anyway. She also said that she was excited about the Indigenous community of writers and that she's interested in work that's pushing the boundaries. She's currently reading, she told us what she was reading, Severance by Ling Ma. The next event was for the thriller lovers out there. It was about The Boy from the Woods by Harlan Coben, and he was in conversation with another thriller writer, Linwood Barkley. Coben has written over 30 novels, and he came up with the idea for The Boy from the Woods while he was on a hike in New Jersey. He saw a boy probably about 6-7 years old walking alone on the trail, and he said that the sequel is being written now. So most likely it will be out in 2022. In Coben's books, there's usually a reoccurring theme that people are prisoners of their past. And one of the things I thought was interesting was that Coben said the more specific your book is, the more universal it seems. And Linwood said that it's really the themes that are universal. The last festival event I'm going to talk about in this video was called Family Identity and Future, with David A. Robertson and Jesse Thistle. They were interviewed by Roland Gulliver, And David A. Robertson is the author of Blackwater, Family Legacy and Blood Memory. It was published earlier this year, I think within the last couple of months, and I can't wait to read it. David talked about the urgency to write about his dad because he was getting older, and he really wanted to document what he had learned from him. The real catalyst, he said, was when he asked him to take him to his trap line. And David said his father looked younger, spoke more clear. He said he looked stronger and that being on the land was so significant for him. David had the feeling of being home and wanted to write about this experience. There are a lot of things that other people can also learn from this story and the experiences that he's had with his father. David said that their experience was that storytelling helps us remember and reclaim our youth. Jessie Thistle is the author of From the Ashes. Writing this memoir started as actually part of Jessie's AA steps, and Jessie's father went missing in 1982. Jessie says that he was subconsciously searching for his father in his own addiction and homelessness, and he called his memoir an inverted love story. He talks about starting with kin and love, and then that is cut off, and his journey and his quest is to find love again. Both memoirs are about relationships with fathers. Both have intergenerational trauma, and both authors talked about how we pass on those stories and how they can be about resiliency and healing and intergenerational healing. As mentioned earlier, I'm looking forward to two things that are happening on Monday. First, I will finally be kicking off the Mondays with Margaret series. And second, the winner of the Giller Prize will be announced. I will be following the Giller Prize along with the Giller Light Virtual Bash, so I'll leave some information in the description below if you would also like to follow along. Please let me know in the comments below if you have read any books mentioned in this video or if there are any that interest you. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.